Universal is no longer just a record label. It is becoming the internet's music monopoly, one acquisition at a time. Major record label in charge of the collection and payment of your royalties. This brings up red flags. I'm telling you what is happening. I am pointing to what is happening, and it's getting worse, not better. As I was looking at this, I was initially going to say Universal Music Group is quietly trying to take control of the music industry, and I don't think it's quietly anymore. I think they're blatantly trying to take control of the music industry, and now they're infiltrating independent artist platforms. No, this is not an exaggeration, okay? They've been doing this, and now this idea of Universal becoming a monopoly is real. Right now, their market presence just for the US is about 42% as far as the music catalog that they own, the revenue stream that they're taking up. And the fact that they're now starting to encroach on independent artist platforms and spaces, I'm really nervous. They're doing things like suing other competitors in the music business, and they're developing competing AI. And now what we're finding out is that 4 months ago, we had heard the news that Universal was in the process of acquiring Downtown. If you guys remember, Downtown Music Holdings is a company that is the parent to CD Baby, right? Music distributor. Songtrust, right? These companies that service independent artists and are basically controlling your royalties. So that means a major record label is now in charge of the collection and payment of your royalties. So about 4 months ago when we covered this, it was $775 million acquisition. And the thing that I said that time is why is no one calling this out as Universal is becoming a monopoly? When we say there is a monopoly, it is a company that is now dominating a particular marketplace. And this brings up red flags because we go, well, monopolies are a really bad thing. And typically the government will kick back and say, for example, this happened with Meta. Do you guys remember this? Meta owns Facebook. Meta purchased Instagram. Meta purchased WhatsApp. And so as Meta continued to try to acquire more and more social media platforms, eventually the Federal Trade Commission, right? So the government stepped in and said, you are not going to do this anymore. And it's because when a company becomes such a giant, it becomes impossible to compete with that company anymore. This was obviously at the end of last year. And why is no one calling out Universal for what it is doing? Because it is not only truly becoming a monopoly in the music market, but once it controls the music business in that it owns the music catalog, but eventually, and that's what's happening right now, eventually it is going to acquire the infrastructure that we all rely on as independent artists. So now we are at the mercy of a corporation in order to even distribute our music. So why does this matter? Okay, so going back to the Downtown deal, this still hasn't gone through, and it's because it's being scrutinized. Now, here's the new thing that just happened. So in the European Union, we have finally someone looking at this. It's not the US just yet, but nonetheless, we have someone in Europe's market being like, you know what? This is concerning. Now, it's not a problem yet because I guess here's the threshold, right? So for the US Federal Trade Commission to consider a company to be a monopoly, you have to hit this 50% threshold. And then it becomes a red flag. And now the Federal Trade Commission will step in and try to stop a company from continuing to acquire all of its competitors. And here's the thing, technically, Universal is not there yet. So Universal is still around that 42% threshold. So we're under that. And then in Europe, I guess the threshold hasn't been met. It's 40%, and it's only 31% for where Universal is at. So the point just being, technically, that's always what happens with these companies. It's always a technicality, right? Like with the lawsuit against Spotify by the Mechanical Licensing Collective and that whole bundling fiasco, right? So you are getting paid less for streams of your songs, and the Mechanical Licensing Collective be like, this is literally what we do. We serve the publishers and the songwriters, and we're telling you, Spotify, that what you're doing is not okay because you are diluting with this whole, oh, we're adding in audiobooks. Oh, it's now bundling. And then they lost on that lawsuit. It got kicked out because of a technicality. And it was in a technicality in the document that controlled the relationship and the royalties. So I go back to this, I go, all right, so technically, right now, by definition, Universal is not a monopoly, but it's a monopoly. And we're always like, oh, the three major record labels, Sony, Warner, Universal. Universal is the biggest record label right now of the world. And they're consuming all of their competitors. And here's the thing, I was reading an article today. There's some speculation that maybe Universal is becoming really big and maybe we should be concerned. But you know what? Actually, I don't think that's the case. And it's because there's so many competitors, right? For the independent artists. And so you think of like, well, there's Believe that owns TuneCore. And a lot of independents use TuneCore. So because there's competition in the market, that's going to stop Universal from becoming the only player, and that's good enough. And I just totally disagree with that. And it's because of these moves that Universal is very intentionally making. So again, when we go back to that threshold, we go of how much of the market Universal has just purchased and how much of it now they're like, oh no, we're not buying more music catalog, right? So we're controlling the royalties, the revenues, the licensing. They go like with this play on acquiring downtown music. It wasn't acquiring music catalog. They're acquiring the companies that provide the services to everyone else. So Songtrust and the collection of your performance royalties, CD Baby, FUGA, Fuga, right? Curve. These are all of the companies that have created that infrastructure for independent artists. So they're doing it. So far, they're getting away with it. And this isn't the first time, right? If you guys remember back in 2012, they had this acquisition for EMI, and this was 1.9 billion. And if I remember correctly, there were EU regulators that came in and they forced Universal to divest. They forced them to sell off something like $750 million of their catalog because of this issue. So I think Universal is continuing to grow, continuing to take up the marketplace, but being aware of what these thresholds are to not be technically considered a monopoly, but they are swallowing their competition. They're just being very tactical in how they're doing this. But now here's the thing. Universal has become the new bully in the music industry. And I covered this, right? So we talked about how Universal is a part of all these lawsuits that are being filed specifically against other music businesses, right? And even some that are not music businesses. I covered this when I was traveling for one of my litigation cases. I was at the airport. I was talking about how I'd seen that Universal was filing a lawsuit against Wayback Machine. It was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So Internet Archive, right? The website that archives different websites over time, which is an amazing function. But I'm like, wow, it almost seems like Universal is weaponizing copyright to be like, well, based on a technicality, if we can find that you archived some version of a song that we own on this certain date, and maybe the license for that song had lapsed, we're now going to sue you for hundreds of millions of dollars, and they might win on that. If you're needing legal help with your career, your business, we got you covered. Feel free to reach out to my law firm. I'm honored to say we have over 100 5-star Google reviews. We offer free case evaluations, which just means that you can give us a call. You can email us. No commitment. We'll just see how we can help. We look forward to hearing from you. And then besides that, we have the lawsuit that was filed, oh my gosh, against Universal's competitor, TuneCore. Just reading some of the opinions and being like, no, we have competitors that are popping up and they're the ones that are going to drive down what Universal is doing. I'm like, what are you talking about? Universal is literally suing its competitors based on other legal theories. They're going to bankrupt their competitors. That's how they're going to handle this. I'm putting two and two together. Maybe they are completely not connected here, but nonetheless, we go back to, I feel like I have observed that Universal, particularly in the last year, has become quite the bully in these different ways, not just with the lawsuits, but we have these lawsuits against music AI companies, and that's a whole different thing as far as these music AI companies allegedly, not even allegedly, they said it in their answers. They just went and took songs owned by others and trained the AI on it. I'm not saying one way or another, but I'm just saying that I am noticing that Universal in particular is suing a lot of its competitor music businesses in this space. So I go, okay, well, maybe the argument with Universal is they're really trying to protect what's theirs. If they have invested and they own a huge music catalog and they're just trying to exploit it, and you have companies that come along, for example, like these music AI companies, and they take digital assets without authorization and train the AI, sure, we can understand that, sort of. Because if Universal is saying it's an ethical issue, we're trying to protect artists, we're trying to protect creators. And in fact, that was their big statement with this acquisition of downtown music. This is going to be so great for independent artists. We understand that these are independent artist platforms, and we think that we're going to be able to enhance what is great. And I go, I don't see how. I'm trying to understand. So I go back and I go, well, because what I do also know is that Universal in the last 12 months has continued to talk about how it is developing its own competitive AI tools and technology. And I go, my biggest concern with these companies that are tech oriented is that they do not have the mindset of we really want to protect creatives in this process, because tech does not complement creative. It just doesn't. It is, we need to not abide by copyright laws. We shouldn't be held to the same standards. We should just be able to train our AI on anything without getting permission, without paying any licensing fees. These conflict. And so we go, well, if the alleged representative of the creatives, Universal, is also working on developing competing products, my concern is what happens when all these companies that are like, we're training and so we can like have AI songs or AI videos or whatever. Okay. If we can just create AI creative stuff and we don't have to pay creatives and we don't have to get permission from them, we don't need them anymore. And so to the degree that Universal is now participating in that, I keep thinking of just like this Trojan horse idea. I'm like, you're saying it's one thing, I'm seeing something else though. So these kind of bully tactics and kind of legal warfare that I'm seeing is really corporate bullying. Plain and simple. It's too powerful. It is already too powerful to compete against. And so as I'm seeing these rivals that should be helping to drive back any kind of monopoly type hold that Universal already has right now and is continuing to gain, I don't see anyone who really would be able to stand up to Universal. And even the government itself is not going to do anything until there's a certain threshold reached, and Universal knows what that threshold is. Universal will just continue divesting and selling off catalogs, so we just never really get to that threshold. So what's the risk for independent artists? And for me, it's as Universal continues to take control of distribution, of publishing, of even AI tech itself, what part can you actually control? So for your actual music career, and the bottom line is that you don't control anything. Let's go to a platform that's not Universal. Well, there's problems with those as well. And we've talked about that. So here's my solution. The only real way for you to protect what you're doing is through DIY, selling directly to your fans. So it's this idea of selling direct, and you can use these platforms like Bandcamp, right? You can use Shopify to sell yourself. And my personal favorite, and I do this, is just my website. So you build a website for yourself where you have full control over the product, over the distribution, over the marketing. No one gets to control the distribution system if you do it yourself. But that also means now, with you building this out, is that you have to be in control of your communication. You have to make sure that obviously you have the social media platform so people know about what's going on. But your email list, making sure that you are actually touching base with the people who care about you. You cannot put the control in these companies' hands, because I'm telling you what is happening. I am pointing to what is happening, and it's getting worse, not better. So you can control your pricing, you can control your lists, your data, and taking ownership. I like to call it this way. Taking ownership of your audience is the most powerful thing that you can do for your bottom line. If your bottom line is, I want to connect with people who care about the creative stuff that I am making, what I am saying is the best way to do it. If you want to make the absolute most from your next release, your single, your album, your video, you have to create a system so that the 10, 50, 200 people who care about your stuff have a way to actually support you. If you don't make any way for someone to be like, I want to contribute and pay you something for your song, if you don't give them a way to do that, then you are cutting off a connection with someone who really cares about you and your project, but also you're cutting off revenue unnecessarily. So look, as Universal continues to basically build its empire on the back of artists, and we're continuing to help in so many ways. It's not just Universal. We've talked about these other companies, right? These competitive independent distributors who are saying, hey, why don't you opt into our AI training, and we might like give you a little break off of any revenue that we make. But oh, by the way, you give up your rights. That's it. We're training our AI. You can never pull that back. And you guys, I think that you're starting to really understand the gravity of what we're saying here. Of these companies are now coming in, and these music companies that really should be for you, should be fighting to protect what you are entitled to. Well, they're not. And so what I'm saying is that you need to keep this in mind to protect your intellectual property. I want you to make the most money. I want you to get excited and stay excited about your music career. And we can really do that by having this DIY, sell directly to consumers, sell directly to your fans. So here's the thing. Universal is no longer just a record label. It is becoming the internet's music monopoly. And it's doing that really one acquisition at a time. The bottom line is that if we don't do something right now, then we are just renting space on some corporation's website, distribution system. And oh, by the way, they're also taking a piece of your royalties one way or another. I'm top music attorney. I'll see you on the next one.